good evening to one and all. I hope I am loud and audible to all of you. My name is Ria, and I'm delighted to be your host on behalf of Cognitia for the webinar session on cloud computing with Azure. Thank you, everyone, for carving out time from your schedule and joining us today. We're privileged to have you all with us and our esteemed subject matter expert, Ahmed. Ahmed not only brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table, but is also a certified cloud expert. So, without any further delay, let's dive right in and unlock the potential of Azure cloud computing. Once again, welcome and thank you everyone for joining. Ahmed, over to you.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. Some loud, clear, all good? All good? Able to hear me? All good?
Yes, sir. Good
Okay,
at
great.
my end.
Okay, allow me a minute. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. And welcome to Azure webinar. And now, with respect to the Azure webinar, basically, we are going to learn and we are going to see how you can use the Azure in your IT services one. What is the different services option available into the Azure one. So what we'll do, probably an hour, we'll complete the basics of the Azure one, and last 15 minutes we'll keep for the QA, where you can ask the question and I will be happy to answer your question one. So let's go ahead and start now. So with respect to the Azure, but before we go for Azure, let's understand the basics of the cloud. Basics of the cloud means what is a cloud? You all are here in this session to understand what is Azure. Azure as a cloud. But the question comes, what is a cloud itself? Why one should go and use the cloud? So to make it very simple, cloud is provide you the platform where you can go and deploy your web server, app server, your network. You can use it to for analytic services, big data services, AI platform. That's what you can eventually use. So cloud platform, one of the famous cloud platform like AWS, your Microsoft Azure, Google One, Oracle, they all are cloud platform. And what they're providing you the option that one can go and create a resources or services in that platform and use it. Now, question comes that what we can also do it on premises, means my current environment, my current data center. I can also create a server, storage, network on premises. So what is the benefit? Why one should eventually go to the cloud itself? When I'm going to have the same kind of feature and functionality on premises, then why we should go? So the answer is that when you are going to the cloud, one of the important aspects that you can only pay for your resources consumption. It means you can only pay whatever you consume. And that is one of the benefit of using the cloud one. Let's take a very simple example. If I want to deploy the web server on my existing data center for 3 months, then I need to go and buy the hardware. Assume I don't have any hardware. I need to buy the new server, and then I can go and deploy my web server. And the question comes, what we can do after the 3 months? Because server is already there, which I already bought. Probably you need to wait for some other project to consume that server, or some new requirement comes to consume that server. But eventually, that server is unutilized for the period when you don't have any requirement. It means you are paying for something which you are not using. Now, if you go to the cloud, one of the important aspects of the cloud that you can pay whatever you consume. It means if I'm deploying a web server in the cloud, be it Azure or AWS or Google, and then I'm only paying for the period when I'm using it, or I'm like 3 months. So if I'm deploying a web server for 3 months, then eventually I'm paying only for 3 months, not beyond that. It means not for the time when we are not using. This gives you the ability that you can go and deploy the resources and pay whatever you consume. Another example, if I want to store my 100 GB of the data for, let's say, 30 days, I go to the cloud, I can store my 100 GB of the data, and I can only pay for 30 days. So that is one of the ability you can get when you move into the cloud one. Not only that, you need to only pay at the end of it. No upfront cost, means you don't need to pay any upfront cost, not any long-term commitment. You can just pay whatever you use, and the day you don't want to use it, stop paying for it, for the resources which you don't need it. And that give you the ultimate benefit as an organization, that I can use or leverage the cloud services, cloud-based services to deploy my resources one. Not only that, I can go and create a machine probably in a few minutes, and then I can go and deploy my application in a probably in an hour or so. On premises, if you need to deploy the web server, you need to create a machine, deploy the OS, which will take probably few hours and so on. In AWS, probably or Azure or Google one, probably a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. And the concept remains the same in all the cloud platform. So one of the important benefit of going to the cloud is a consumption-based model. And that's why you're looking that everyone start moving to the cloud to get that ability one. Now, when you go to the cloud, like Azure or any other cloud platform, so eventually, if you want to compare, there are three types of the cloud platform: public, private, and hybrid. Sometimes public platform is also known as cloud platform. Private cloud is also known as your on-premises, your existing data center, your organization data center, which is your on-premises data center, is also called a private cloud. We call it one because the difference between a on-premises and private cloud is very thin line. And then we have a hybrid. So if you look the difference between public, private, and hybrid, so the public cloud, your Azure is public cloud. Microsoft Azure is the public cloud. Public cloud is the one where you can go and use it whenever you need it. Anyone can go and use it, like you and me. Whenever I want to deploy my application, I'll go and create my account in Azure and I'll start using it. And I can only pay whatever I consume. Again, same concept which we have just discussed, pay as you go model. Now, with respect to the private cloud, a private cloud means which is controlled and owned by you. You means as an organization. As an organization, you own it, you control it. Now, when you own it and control it, it means you need to go and buy the hardware, software, licenses. You should have your data center where you go and deploy your servers managed by your organization. So you eventually have a control it. When you control everything, you own everything, then of course there's no concept of pay as you go model, because if you own something, then you are paying for whether you're using or not. But the main aspect is in a private cloud that you can decide who can use it, your employees, your associate, your partner. You have a total control because public cloud is offered to everyone. Now, as an organization, sometime I want to use both. I want my web server maybe in public cloud, database server in private cloud, or my primary data center in public cloud, or my private primary data center in private cloud, or on premises and your DR or disaster recovery is in public cloud. I want to use both of it. It means I have a services running on my public and private both. I'm using both one. As an organization, some services in cloud, public cloud, some services in private one. This concept is known as hybrid cloud. So as an organization, you can decide which one I should go and deploy in public cloud, which one I can go and deploy in private cloud, and I can use both of it. So as a organization, you can also go for only public, means all the services in public, only private, all the services in your private one, or mix of it, some in public and some in private. So with respect to the your model's point of view, you can go for public, private, and hybrid one. But Azure, remember, Azure is part of the public cloud. Either Azure or AWS or Google or Oracle, all are public cloud. That's not a private one. So you can also go for a different type of the service provider, your cloud for your usage or requirement one. Now, when you go to the cloud, then how you can manage your services. So when you move into the cloud offer you the three types of the services falls under the three categories: infrastructure as a service, also called as IaaS, platform as a service known as PaaS, or software as a service known as SaaS, SaaS. Now, if you see in the screen, we have defined your some task based on the blue or green color. Now, if you look and compare your on-premises, which is a on-premises or private cloud, you are eventually controlling everything. Everything means everything, including your data center, your hardware, your network, your server, your operating system, your backup, monitoring, your data, everything you are actually doing. You're owning everything. You are managing everything. If hardware fails, you take care. If virtual machine fails, you take care. If OS fails, you take care. Deploying of application, you do it. Backup, monitoring, you are owning everything on premises. But eventually, when you move into the cloud, then cloud will offer you the services in a three different categories known as IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Now, the services which falls under the IaaS or PaaS and SaaS, what is the main difference? The main difference between IaaS and PaaS and SaaS that in IaaS, you manage everything starting from the OS and above. Means you create a virtual machine, install your own operating system, whichever operating system you required, Windows, Linux. Then you can deploy your application and manage everything. But below the your virtual machine, which include your hardware, your physical server, everything is managed by the service provider like Azure, Microsoft. So infrastructure as a service provide you the opportunity or option for you as an end user or organization that you manage everything starting from the VM and above. That is also known as operating system and above. In this case, if your physical server fails, Microsoft will take care. But if OS fails, you take care. You are managing it OS. You develop the code, deploy the code, backup, monitoring, availability, scalability, security, everything is taken care by you. But if you want to have an access at the physical server level, of course, no, that is not allowed. And when you create a machine, install the operating system, you can install any application, PHRMS, email, file storage, database. You can install anything as per your wish. Now, platform as a service provide you the option that you can only manage your code. Code means you are only responsible for developing a code and deploying the code. You are responsible for developing a code and deploying the code. Nothing below that. It means you just need to ask Azure, hey, Azure, give me a virtual machine which have a Windows operating system and or Linux operating system, and also install the my Python runtime because I want to deploy my Python application or Java application. If your OS fails, Microsoft will take care. Server fails, Microsoft will take care. Your job is only limited to code development and deployment. That is known as platform as a service. In a SaaS, which is known as software as a service, you are actually managing you are accessing your application. You are just accessing your application. Everything is managed by the service provider, like your Salesforce, your Office 365, or assume that Gmail is a paid service like that only. You are paying for your usage. When you're creating your enterprise Gmail, you are actually paying for per month. You don't need to worry where the application is running, which hardware, what if the application fails, what if the server fails. You don't need to worry about it. You can just pay for monthly usage and start using it. That's what you can eventually do with respect to the software as service. It means when you move from your on premises to the cloud, you can use the services based on the IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. And based on your project requirement, you can go and choose one of it. If you don't want to manage the hardware, go for IaaS. Don't want to manage your, you want to just, or you just want to manage your application, go for PaaS. You don't want to manage your code, go for SaaS also. So you eventually go for IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS one from the application point of view. Now, with respect to the cloud, that what we talk about it. What is a cloud? What is the benefit of cloud? What is your public and private or hybrid one? And then IaaS and PaaS or SaaS one. The next we are going to talk about the basics of the Microsoft Azure. Now, assume I want to deploy my virtual machine. I want to store my data. I want to create a database server. Then where I should go and deploy it? Of course, I require a data center. Ultimately, your virtual machine, database, storage, everything should be deployed into the data center only. When you're moving to the public cloud, this data center should be provided by the service provider like Microsoft Azure. So Microsoft Azure provide you this data center or collection of the data center in all the major part of the world. And wherever they provide you this data center known as region. It means if I want to deploy my web server, app server, DB server, then I should select the one of the region where I should go and deploy my server or application. Like in India, I can go and deploy into the Mumbai, Chennai, or Pune, or Hyderabad is also coming. So these region is what? Where they have their data center. And simple one, the city where they have their presence. So what is region? Region is basically provide you the data center where you can go and deploy your application. Now, the question comes on what basis I can select the region? You should always select the region which is near to your business proximity. If I'm based out Delhi and I want to deploy my application, probably Mumbai is nearest for me. If I'm in Hyderabad or Chennai, probably Hyderabad or Chennai is nearest to me. So Azure provide you the data center across the globe, and wherever they have a data center, we call a region. A region which you can select based on the proximity and you eventually go and deploy your web app on DB or the servers here. Now, with respect to the Azure, in every region, so or actually is your city. Region is what? City. So if I called Central India, West India, South India, this is actually your city, like Mumbai, Pune, or Chennai. So region, which you call in Azure, have a data center, but region is actually is in one of the city one. Now, what Azure did to provide you the high availability, Azure divided the whole world into the multiple geographies. Like India is a one geography, US is a one geography, Europe might be a one geography, and so on. And in every geography, they will provide you the two regions, minimum two. Why? Two region for high availability. Your data for the few services, not all, but for few of the services, your data get replicated across the region. Like in India, probably if I want to deploy my some of the database, my database will get replicated across the region like Mumbai, Chennai, or Mumbai, Pune, and so on. Or if I want to host some storage or data into the storage, and I want the data should be replicated across the region, then data replicate within the region for high availability point of view. So geography also provide you the feature like your compliance point of view. You are working on a project. That project says that, hey, please deploy my application within the country boundary. My data should not go beyond a country boundary. Then I might need to select the primary and data center and secondary or DR data center in the same region. That's why every geography provide you two different regions in the same geography for high availability from the compliance or requirement point of view, and that you can eventually use it. So you can also go and use the geography one. Now in every region, or rather I should say in few of the region, not all, in Azure, few of the region have more than one data center in the same region. What I'm trying to say that if assume I have in Mumbai, but in Mumbai, I don't have only single data center. Rather, I have a three data center, which are distance apart. Probably one data center in north, one in south, one in central Mumbai. They are distance apart. So benefit that now I can deploy my application into the three data center in the same region. And when you deploy the three, let's say web server, or let's say deploying a three web server across three different data center in the same region, then what is the benefit? Benefit if one goes down, I can access from second. If second goes down, I can access from third. If my entire region goes down, I can access from another region. So the data center, which is basically part of the region, is known as availability zone. Please also remember, with respect to the Azure, Azure only provide you the availability zone feature in few of the region, not all, but they're upgrading it. Soon it will be launched in other regions, and uh, after a certain period, all the region will have a three availability zone with respect to the Azure region one. So you can go and deploy your application across the three different data center in the same zone, sorry, in the same region across the three different zone, and you can eventually use for your high availability or high performance point of view. Now, with respect to the Azure, so when you start a journey in Azure, select the region where you want to deploy your web server or app server or DB server or storage. When you're creating a machine or web or app server, select the zone where you want to deploy, like zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3 of the region. You might also deploy across the region. If my entire zone goes down, all the three zone goes down, I can access from secondary also. That also I can do. So this is what we talk about more from the basics of the Azure infrastructure component, which you can use to deploy your web application one, and how you make your application more highly available. That what you can eventually use and suggest and then plan. Now, the next section, we are going to talk about some of the Azure services. Azure provide you the hundreds of the services, which include storage, services under the storage, services under the network, services under the compute, and so on. Now, one of the important services in Azure is your virtual machine, which we called your virtual machine itself. In Azure, the service of virtual machine is basically used for virtual machine, creating a virtual machine. And when you're creating a machine, Azure will create the machine, you can get the machine, you can deploy the application and then start using it. Now, when you want to create a machine, Azure also provide you different images. Azure support that. When you're creating a machine, you can also go and deploy your images. Images means operating system or operating system, and Azure support all the major operating system. You can install the Windows, Ubuntu, Red Hat, and so on. So all the major images are available in Azure, which you can use to deploy your application or server. So you can use Azure virtual machine, that is also known as compute. Compute means which give you the processor and memory. Now the question comes, if I want to create a machine or I want to deploy my HR application or my finance application or my admin application, then I need to first create the machine. And then I need to select which operating system I should use to create a machine one. Okay, so I assume I selected the Ubuntu or Windows and so on. Now the next question comes, what will be the size of the machine? Size means what is the size of the virtual machine which I want to use. But one of the important aspects with respect to the Azure virtual machine, that when you select the image, you to also select the how much disk you required, size of the disk, processor, and memory. So what Azure did, Azure created a different instance type like A1, A2, A3, and so on. And this instance type basically give you the necessary processor and memory. So when you're creating a virtual machine, you have to select the respective operating system and select the your instance type, which give you the necessary processor and memory. And then you can also select the disk size, disk where your eventually operating system goes, application goes. So with respect to the Microsoft Azure, Microsoft Azure will provide a virtual machine. In this virtual machine, you can install any type, all the major operating systems. You can also select the resources which give you the processor, memory, and how many disks you want to attach, and then you can start using it. Now, one of the important benefit out of the Azure virtual machine that you can only pay whatever you consume. So you can use your Azure virtual machine to deploy your application and access it. And if I need a machine with 2 processor or 4 GB RAM or 8 processor, 16 GB RAM, and so on, that I can create a machine and use these resources and then deploy my application. And how I need to pay? You need to only pay for your consumption, your usage, pay per use, pay as you go, whatever you called. So if I create a virtual machine and I want to use this machine for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 hour or 10 hour, I can just go and use it. And then I can only pay what I am consuming. Please also remember, when you're creating a machine in Azure as a known as virtual machine, your machine will be created in probably few minutes. Few minutes means probably 5 minutes or 10 minutes, not more than that. So you can create a virtual machine. Your machine will be available in 5 to 10 minutes. Rather, I should say 5 minutes, and then you can create a machine, log into the machine, deploy your application, and start using it. And you need to only pay for the period when your machine is in running state. If you stop the machine, you don't need to pay for machine. So another important advantage that you do only pay when your machine is in use, means machine is in running state. If machine is not in running state, then you don't need to pay for it. So Azure Virtual Machine is a service which basically provide you the your compute or processor and memory with respect to the machine. And remember, with respect to the Azure Virtual Machine is your IaaS service, falls under the IaaS one, infrastructure as a service. And you need to infrastructure service means you can manage everything starting from the OS and above. You are responsible for installation of OS. If OS fails, you take care. But if machine fails, Microsoft will take care. So you can also have a Azure Compute one. Now, Azure Compute give you the single machine. Okay, I can also want to create a more machine, but rather of creating a more machine, I want a machine into the some from the scaling point of view. I want to scale my machine. Like I want to go for horizontal scaling. Horizontal scaling means when your load increase, I want to add more machines. When load increase, I want to add more machines. When load decrease, I want to reduce the machine. And that too in an automated approach. So when load increase, add the machine, load decrease, remove the machine that I want. And this concept is known as scale set. Azure Virtual Machine Scale Set is a service which is basically used to scale your virtual machine instances. And you can create your identical VMs or different size of the VM, but more from the scaling point of view. A good option which you can use for your application. Assume you are using an application and you want that whenever the load increase, like my machine application is used by 100 user, what if my application is used by 100 2000 user, 1000 users or 200 user or 500 user, then what I want, I can create a design that if my load increase, I can add more instance, or if load decrease, I can reduce the instances. So you can add the instance when load increase and reduce the instance when load decrease. This will help you to add more instances to manage your performance or reduce the instance to manage your cost. So virtual machine and virtual machine scale set is basically provide you the horizontal scaling by adding more machines for your application one. Now, when you create a virtual machine or a virtual machine scale set, you log into the virtual machine, you install your application and start using it. And at the time of creating a machine, you can ask Microsoft, hey, create a machine with Windows, Linux, or Ubuntu, and so on. But sometime I also want to deploy the services and I want to more, I want to deploy my application, but under the PaaS platform, PaaS platform. So with respect to the app services is the Microsoft Azure offering under the platform as a service where your job is to only develop the code and deploy the code. Rest will be taken care by the app services. You just tell the Microsoft, hey, please give me a one machine with Windows or one machine with the Linux with your Python runtime environment. Oh, Microsoft will create the machine, install the OS, install the runtime, and give it to you. Now you can go and deploy your application. If machine fails, Microsoft will take care, and you need to only pay for your usage period. So instead of deploying your application manually on the machine, you can use app services where you can go and deploy the application without managing your infrastructure or server or hardware, whatever you called. Now, with respect to the your Azure, you can also use the function. Now, with respect to the from the Azure point of view, you can have another service known as Azure Function. Azure Function is a service which you can use to execute your code for a small period. If I want to deploy my code and I want to execute the code, but I want to execute or deploy the code for short-term period, probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes only, or I want to execute my code few times in a day, few times in a week, few times in a month, then I can use Azure Function. So one of the important difference between virtual machine and function, when you create a machine, your billing is started whether your machine is in use or not. If your code executes 2 times in a day and you're deploying a virtual machine, you need to eventually pay for 24 hours. But when you use Azure Function, if your code is execute 2 times in a day, you need to only and that too for 5 minutes each, you to eventually pay for 5 plus 5, 10 minutes only. So use Azure Function, pay whatever you consume, pay for your code execution period. Now, one of the important feature of the function that you need to only pay for your compute charges, means code execution charges. If my code executed for 5 seconds, I only pay for 5 seconds. Or you can also use Azure function that it can trigger based on some event. So I want that my whenever user want to access my application to add the data, then function can be triggered and process my data. Or I can also schedule my function that it will execute the code on a specific day or a specified hour or multiple hours. That all we can do with respect to the Azure compute, Azure function one. So Azure compute services provide you the processor and memory, and compute services when provide a processor memory, then you can go for Azure virtual machine, Azure virtual machine scale set, app services, and Azure function, and you can use it. The next one we're going to talk about the virtual network. Virtual network is like your virtual machine. We have a virtual network. So when you start a journey in cloud, you need to first create a virtual network. Virtual network is a logical representation of your network in Azure. And you can use Azure virtual network to deploy your services, servers in your virtual network one. So virtual network is the boundary of the network. Boundary of the network means Azure virtual network tells that how much IPs I needed in my network. So it's the boundary of the network, which you can use to say, hey, I want to create a network for 100 where I can deploy 100 servers, 200 server, 500 server, and so on. Then virtual network will contain your subnet. Subnet is the one where you can go and deploy your server, database, and so on. And subnet will, your server will communicate to the subnet via the network card, network interface card, NIC. You can also integrate the virtual network with your other virtual network. It means if I want to deploy two virtual network, one for production, one for development in cloud, and I want the communication can happen both the your virtual network, yes, I can do that. So virtual network is used to deploy your web server, app server, DB server. Virtual network also used to connect another virtual network. Like I have a virtual network, one is running in region one for from the primary data center point of view, and region two as a DR point of view. And I can enable the communication between two virtual networks so that they can communicate. If my primary goes on, I can access from secondary. Not only that, you can also integrate your virtual network with your on-premises network. Why you are integrating with the on-premises network? To create a hybrid environment, hybrid one. So virtual network can be integrated with another virtual network in Azure, or can be integrated with on-premises, so that your user on on-premises can access your application running in cloud also, in Azure also. So with respect to your virtual network is your network boundary in cloud where you can go and deploy your application. And remember, virtual network is independent and isolated. So two virtual network does not communicate unless and until you need it. You can also secure your virtual network with your own virtual firewall. Your own virtual firewall using which you can secure your network, known as network security group. Network security group is used to secure your subnet or network interface, your virtual machine one, whatever you say. So your network security group is the virtual firewall using which you can protect your network or subnet and virtual machine. You can decide which traffic should goes in, which traffic should goes out. You can also use the network security group to decide who are allowed to access my server or who cannot. I can also allow my server can be only accessed from the specific IP address range. So you can also use the virtual network, which is your own network in the cloud. And there you can go and deploy your web app or DB server, and you can use network security group to secure it. Now, what if I have a multiple web servers? If I have a multiple web server, how I can provide the high availability to my users? How I can provide the high availability to my users? To provide the high availability to the user, we need to use load balancer. A load balancer is basically used to provide the high availability by distributing the traffic to the multiple instances. And Azure provided two different load balancer. One is known as Azure Load Balancer. Name is also Load Balancer. Another is Application Gateway. Two different product. Both are load balancer, but name are different. So one is known as Azure Load Balancer, which is also load balancer. Application Gateway is also load balancer. But one of the key difference between your load balancer and application gateway, load balancer support all the TCP and UDP protocol. It means if your application should running on the specific TCP and UDP protocol, then I can use the Azure load balancer. Now, another one is your application gateway. With respect to the load balancer, you can also deploy the deploy the SSL TLS certificate to access with HTTPS secure one. Remember, load balancer is a regional service. You can deploy in one of the region and access it. Now, in comparison to the load balancer, you can also use your application gateway. Application gateway is also the load balancer, but application gateway support only the HTTP and HTTPS protocol. An application gateway can also use it across the region or in hybrid also. So you have a load balancer or application gateway. Whether you use load balancer and application gateway, both provide you the high availability and load distribution. It means if I'm running of 10 servers, 10 web server, I can deploy one load balancer above the web server. So when user access my application, it will first send to the load balancer, and load balancer will distribute the traffic to the 10 machine. And if that machines which is behind the load balancer, if one of the machine goes down, load balancer will distribute the traffic to the remaining machine. So it also provides you the high availability. So you can use Azure load balancer or application gateway. Azure load balancer and application gateway are two different products from the load balancing point of view, which you can eventually use. And remember, whether you're using load balancer or application gateway uh, use at the as the HTTP or HTTPS protocol, load balancer used for a TCP and UDP protocol. So you can also use it. Then we can also go and have a storage. Azure provide you the different types of the storage, like a disk, a file storage, object storage, and so on. Now, when you're creating a machine, virtual machine, and you want to deploy the operating system, you also require the disk, the same disk which you attach to your laptop or desktop or server. So when you want to deploy your application or operating system, you require the disk. So Azure also provide your disk, and disk can be a HDD or SSD, your traditional magnetic disk or solid state drive. Azure provide you both the type of the disk, and you can use either of it. And you can create the disk, attach the disk to the machine, and deploy your operating system or application one. You can also create a file storage, which you can use to attach the storage to the multiple machine for data sharing purpose. So you can, if you have a file storage, like a central storage, which you want to attach to the multiple machine, so the data can be shared, yes, that is also supported, known as file storage. And then we have also the blob storage. Blob storage means your binary large object equivalent to your Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive. That is another storage. So Azure also provide you storage like a Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, where you can store your data and you can access the data from anywhere. You can share the data with your colleagues like you're doing with the Google Drive and other one. You can also use blob storage. So use your blob storage to store your data which you are using to store like in Google Drive, Dropbox, and OneDrive. You can store any type of the data. A data can be data. Data can be a binary data. You can store your audio, video, images, your PDF file, your Excel file. You can eventually store anything. You can also use to store your backup, your archive data, your day-to-day data which you want to develop and use. Just you can use it for any purpose. You can store unlimited data. Unlimited means unlimited. And you can only pay whatever you consume. You can store unlimited data and you can only pay whatever you consume. So you can also use your blob storage with respect to the your storage point of view and use it. You can also go and create your some of the container services, Docker container. If I want to create a Docker container, then you can go to the Azure and create a Docker container. Azure Container Instance provide you the option that you can go and create a single container. But in case I want to deploy container in the cluster, then Azure also support your Kubernetes services, same Kubernetes services which you are using on premises. So Azure also support your Azure Kubernetes services where you can create a container in the cluster. So from the container point of view, Azure support a single container or Kubernetes services as a cluster also. Azure also support your database services. You can go and create a database under the PaaS platform where you can just ask Azure, hey, Azure, give me a database. Azure will create the database and you can just connect the database, create the database engine, create the database table and schema, and then use it. Some people also call it DAS, database as a service, but actually is a PaaS model. From the database point of view, Azure provide you the database as a relational and non-relational both. Like on premises, you have a relational database like MS SQL, MySQL, PostgreSQL, Oracle, which all are relational database. With respect to the non-relational database, you also have a MongoDB, your Hive, R, and so on. The non-relational database. Azure provide you both the services. You can create a Azure database under the PaaS model, which include your Microsoft SQL, MySQL, and PostgreSQL. And Azure will manage everything. If server fails, Azure take care. Azure will also do the daily backup. If you want, you can also go for Cosmos DB, which is a non-relational database like your MongoDB. You can also store your non-relational data into the Cosmos DB. So from the database point of view, you can either go for Cosmos DB or SQL database and so on. You can also replicate your database across the region for high availability or across the availability zone for high availability. You want a database replica across the zone in the same region, like availability zone? Yes, they support it. You want a database across the region for high availability? If one region goes down, I can access from second. Yes, we can do it. Azure provide you all the services. So eventually you can use Azure database from the high availability point of view and then use it. Now let's see how we can use the Microsoft Azure one. So if you see, you have a Microsoft Azure account, like a portal.azure.com is your Microsoft account, which you can log in. And you can see Microsoft provide you all the major services under the different categories. We have just discussed few, but eventually it provide you all the services. It provides you services under the compute, like a virtual machine, scale set, function, and so on, or containers or database. You can just go and create your storage, create your network, create your database in your Azure one. So you can also create your virtual machine. So you have a virtual machine, you have a storage, you have a load balancer. You can just go and create it. This is my portal. I can log in and I can create a machine. Let us assume I want to create a machine. I just need to provide some information. So I want to create a machine. I want to give, like, say, what is my machine name? Let's say demo VM. I want to select the region where I want to deploy the machine. I can select the region. You can see all the region here, all the region names, South India, West US, Central US, and so on. You can also select the zone. I'll deploy the machine into the zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. I can also select my image. I want to deploy my Ubuntu, Red Hat, Windows, all the images. I can select my size. I want 2 processor, 4 processor, 2 GB RAM, 8 GB RAM, all. And then I just go and create a machine. When machine get created, you can use the machine, log in the machine, and then access it. You can also create the virtual network. You can create a virtual network by defining what all the IP range I needed. So you say, I want to create a network with, let's say, my just a minute. So I want to create it is sorry, a virtual network name. I'm so sorry. I'm giving a name. So demo VNet, and you can select the region. Then you can go and define your IP range. What the IP range you want? You want 100 IPs, 200 IPs, or 256 IPs, 512 IPs. You can define and create a network, and you can use it. You can also create your SQL database or MySQL database. You can use it. So eventually Azure provide you all the option with respect to the one. You can create your account, start creating your resources, start managing your resources, and then you can eventually use it. And this is what we talk about in this webinar. We give you the basic introduction of the Azure, what is the advantage of using the Azure, what if you use the Azure for your deployment, be it a machine, network, database, storage, and so on. So this is what we discussed one. Now let's go for QA. If you have any question, please go ahead and type your question and we'll be happy to answer it. Yeah, go ahead. Priya or in team, if you have a question, let's go ahead.
Not from my end, but thank you very much. Dear participants, if you may have any question, please let him know in the chat window. Meanwhile, I've posted the feedback link in the chat. Please do let us know how did you find the session.
So Middle ask you how the DNS mapping on the load balancer. See, with respect to the DNS mapping, when you create a load balancer give you one public IP or private IP as per your load balancer which you create. If you want a load balancer as a public one, it gives you public IP. If give you a private one, it gives you the private IP. Now, if you want to access the load balancer with your DNS name, you must create the Azure DNS zone. Azure DNS zone is Azure DNS service. This Azure DNS zone will be a public DNS zone or private DNS zone where you can create a record for public IPs or private one. So if you want to access your load balances with your own DNS name or domain name, then create a record in your DNS zone, give the name and map with your IP address, and then you can access it. Right. So that's what you can use. Right. So this is your specifically you can do in terms of mapping the load balancer one. So you can also use using. Ria, can you just check? Are you people talking about which form? I don't understand it. So if you have a specific question, please go and post it here. So just a minute, just slowly. Okay, so anything to do LB backends or no? Once your load balancer is created, load balancer give you the IP address. Then you can use that IP address and map this IP address in your DNS server and start accessing with your one. That's simple thing. So if you have a domain name abc.com, create a record with www.abc.com and map with the load balancer IP address, whatever you get, and start using it. So what do you mean by the edge firewall? Which firewall you're talking about? Can you just elaborate? Are you talking about Azure firewall or network security group? Which one? Meanwhile, rest of the team, if anyone a question, please go ahead and. So FortiGate and Palo Alto is a third-party firewall. It is not a Azure firewall. So we are here talking about the Azure firewall, not the third-party firewall. Okay. So third-party firewall, you need to look how they work, and whatever the way they're working on premises, that you need to look from your end. I'm talking about the Azure services, and Azure is provide their own Azure firewall one. Okay. And if you look from the Azure firewall point of view, yes, Azure firewall also support the high availability one, which you need to create it. But if you're using Palo Alto or other one, that you need to deploy and manage at your own. Of course, you can deploy in Azure, but that is something different from the Azure provided services one. What is NSG? NSG is your network security group. Is a virtual firewall which is used to protect your machine or subnet. Use the NSG to define how the traffic should be allowed to go inside your subnet or virtual machine. You can use the NSG to decide that, okay, my machine can only access on port 80 or 22 or TCP port or UDP port, or my machine can be only accessed from the specific IP range and so on. That what you can eventually use one. So with respect to your NSG is your virtual firewall which you can use. Private endpoint in Azure basically is a concept using which you can bring the Azure services in your own virtual network. if assume I deploy a database or I want to deploy my storage service, then with respect to the Azure database or storage, if I want to bring into my own network, means I want to deploy, I might want to map into my one of the subnet, we use private endpoint. Private endpoint will be used to bring your service in your own network one, in simple word. So with respect to the your private endpoint is a concept using which you can bring the services in your own network one and deploy. So with respect to the your Azure, you can eventually use the private endpoint to bring in your own services in the network and use it once. So that what you can also use with respect to the one. Now, please remember, as of now, the question is Azure High HA firewall. As Azure firewall as on date does not support IPv6, but yes, you can use for the high availability one. Not all the support IPv6. Probably tomorrow may support, but that's fine, right? So yes, you can go for high availability, but with the IPv4. If you're talking about the specific to the Azure firewall, not with other product. Yeah, team, still we have a few minutes. Please go ahead and post your question. Yeah, anyone have a question, please go ahead. Still we have 2-3 minutes. So Varun, with respect to the LB and app gateway, one of the simple example is if I my application support HTTP and HTTPS protocol, then we can go for app gateway, application gateway. But assume I want to deploy the application, I want to use some TCP protocol or UDP protocol, then we can go and use the load balancer, because load balance support your TCP and UDP protocol. So if your application support your TCP or UDP protocol, go for load balancer. If your application work on HTTP or HTTPS protocol, go for app gateway. So that is a typical example you can use, that when we should go for load balancer or when we should go for app gateway. But please remember, both are your load balancer, which distribute the traffic and provide the high availability. And another important difference, load balancer work on the layer 4 of the OSI layer, and application gateway work on the layer 7 of the OSI layer, right? And provide you some additional feature and functionality like domain forwarding or path-based URL-based routing or path-based routing also, right? So some additional one which you can use. Yep, a minute. We have a minute. Anyone have a question? So with respect to the cloud security, if you want to go to the Azure, Azure provide you the Azure AZ um, 500 course, Azure Cloud Security. Yes, course is there. You can go and opt for Azure Cloud Security. Microsoft provide you that is also you can eventually use it. Now, Mridul ask you the one more question, local peering and remote peering. Actually, there's a no concept of local remote peering. Rather, we call a local peering and global peering. The local peering and global peering, basically the concept is peering only. Peering is a concept of connecting two different virtual network in Azure. If I have two different virtual network in Azure and I want to integrate the two virtual network in Azure so that they can communicate using the Azure backbone link on via private IP address, then we use concept known as peering. When two network are in the same region, we call a local peering. When the two network across the region, we call a global peering. So that is just from the name aspect. But the main service name is peering. So peering is a concept using which you can connect two different virtual network in Azure to communicate one. I don't know what do you mean by the dynamic report. What do you mean by the dynamic report of specific service? What report you want to generate? Okay, so anyone else have a question? Otherwise, we are good to close now. Dynamic inventory. Yeah. Azure provide you the option. You can go into one of the service and you can generate all the resources which you are using. You can generate the report. You can check your bills. You check your utilization. You can check the usage. Yes, you can do everything from the Azure one. Azure provide you the services option where you can generate the inventory, or usage one. What are the services you are using? Yes, go to the subscription and you can get everything. Okay. Anyone else have a question? Yeah. Anything else have a question?
We're good, sir. Team, unless you have a question, we're good to wrap up. Thank you so much for participating and joining along. We hope you all had substantial takeaways from the session. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Bye.